Hi, my name's Kim and I'm starting a series around combining my love for reading with my love for D&D. The aim of this video and the rest of the series is to read through the D&D classes. So as you can tell, this video is going to be about bards. This is partially inspired by the fact that I am participating in the fantasy bingo, and for this year's card they had a bard square on the bingo board, and last year they had a druid square on the bingo board, and probably they'll have a paladin one because it's been an option for the past 2 years and it hasn't been picked yet, so chances are it might crop up for the next bingo board. For the most part, each class will have its own video, but some of them I've grouped together just to make it a little bit easier. So the classes that I'm hoping to cover include bards, obviously, the cleric slash healer, artificer slash tinkerer, druids, rangers, rogues, paladins, and then I'm also going to group the others together. So I'm going to group together the melee fighters, barbarians and monks, and then I'm also grouping together the magical classes, which includes the wizards, the warlocks and also the sorceress. So that's the aim of this series. Altogether it's kind of 9 videos I'm hoping to pull together. I have at least one book in mind for pretty much all of the different classes, but if you do have any recommendations I would love to hear them. Some of them are pretty obvious. They obviously have the class in the title, so you'll see that in a minute, but others you have to do a bit of digging to try and find out what class is actually represented in the book series. So yeah, I'm happy to hear recommendations because I feel like this project's probably going to take me a little bit of time to get through. So for this video I have 3 books in mind that I'm hoping to get through. The first is Sing the Four Quarters by Tanya Huff. The second is Till Death Do Us Bard by Rose Black, and then the final one is Bard City Blues by Nathaniel Webb. I know next to nothing about these books apart from the fact that they all have bards included in them. I know that Till Death Do Us Bard is more of a cozy fantasy, and I think that Bard City Blues also is. I literally know nothing about them, so once I start reading I'll update you on the blurbs, the plots, and let you know what my thoughts are. Hello from a new angle in my room. I'm trying this one out, but because the window's right behind me I don't know what the lighting's going to be like, so you'll have to mind as I'm moving my head around to try and block it out. I started Sing the Four Quarters by Tanya Huff last night, and so I thought I'd give a quick update on what it's about and also how I'm finding it so far. So Sing the Four Quarters follows our main character Anise. She is a bard and she is able to sing all 4 quarters, which is all 4 elements. Most people can only sing one element, and by singing the elements it essentially means you're controlling these spirits that are linked to the elements called the key. Anise is also a princess, or she was a princess. Her last request of her dying father was that he grant her a boon so that she'd be admitted to the Bard College, because it was known that she was a great singer and that she would really excel in this, but her father hadn't allowed this to happen before. And Anise knows that her brother, once he becomes king, is considering marrying her off to strengthen an alliance, and she doesn't want that. So she gets admitted to the Bard College, and her brother states that in order to do so, essentially she is to give all of her property over to the royal family. She's essentially not one of them anymore, and also that if she does want to have any children in the future she needs the permission of the king, otherwise it'll be treason. And had I read the blurb before I started you would get a bit of an idea about where this is going. However, I didn't. I just saw it was recommended as a book that was about bards, and I thought I'll just pick it up. I don't really know anything about any of the books I'm reading. I've just picked them up because I was looking for bard books. The books that I used for the bingo, you don't necessarily have to have something that specifically states that they're a bard. The subreddit broadened what they considered a bard just to make that fit, so it included storyteller and poet and stuff like that. So that's what I ended up using for my bingo board, because it didn't really feel like there was a lot of books that explicitly had bard mentioned as a main character. Anyway, the point is that, as you will realise when you find out Anise's backstory a couple of chapters in, you realise that before that point she's been quite sick, and she mentions that her trousers aren't fitting right. Immediately I realised where it was going. I was like, oh, she's having a baby, and I went back and read the blurb afterwards and realised that I would have known that if I'd have read that. Anyway, the whole point is that the person who's the father of her child is being accused of treason. We have multiple points of view from not only Anise but the Duke, and also her friends, and also her brother as well, the king. So we are fluctuating between all these different points of view. Anise is keeping her pregnancy a secret because she is, worried about what her brother might do. She believes that he will do what he said and essentially have her held as being treasonous. And especially when they find out that the Duke has now been accused of treason, she's being selfish in that she's worried for herself, because not only is she now pregnant, but she's pregnant with someone who's accused of treason's baby, which then makes her treasonous for having a treason as baby. I don't know if treason is a word, I don't think it is. Either way, she hatches a plot to help him escape, and I'm about 40% in, and we're just now following that as they are making their escape and running away and trying to find out why he has been accused of treason. So in terms of the book itself, I'm actually really liking it so far. It was written and published in the 1990s, and I think you can get the vibe that it is a kind of 90s fantasy. I've only ever read one Robin Hood book, Assassin's Apprentice, but it feels quite comparable to that in terms of the way that it's written. It feels quite light, if that makes sense. It feels like quite a light fantasy. There's a lot of political things going on and a lot of moving parts, but at the same time that doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like the focus is so deeply in that, as opposed to other fantasies that I've read, which is not a bad thing. I enjoy a political fantasy, especially one that's really complex, but this one is really easy to read and really easy to get through, which I really appreciate. And then the characters as well, it does take you a moment to kind of understand what is going on in this world, because you are kind of thrown in with no explanation. You meet Anise, you know that she's quite ill, you know that she is talking about relations in this world. You meet her as she returns from this walk that bards do, where they essentially go around and find out information about where they travel to, and then they have to go back to the bardic college and do a recall, which essentially means that they repeat every single thing that they witnessed when they were on their walk, which is, I think, is really cool thing. I really like that element of it. I think it's really interesting. The plot itself is relatively straightforward. As I said, it's not too complex of a fantasy, and we're at the point now where everyone is kind of after the same goal. They want Anise to come back, and they want to figure out what is going on with these accusations of treason against the Duke. And so I kind of like that there is not a lot of misunderstanding. I'm not opposed to misunderstanding and making everything more intense and confusing than it needs to be, but because it feels so straightforward, it feels just like a really easy read as we're moving on to the next steps. And so yeah, I'm about 40% in. I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of it plays out. I should read the rest of the blurbs for the books that I plan to read, but I will not be doing that. I've committed now. I'm just not going to read the rest of the blurbs. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about this angle. I feel like the light is making me look. We'll have to play around with that. So I finished Sing the Four Quarters, and I'm going to give it 4 stars. I actually really liked it. Where I last updated you, I was about 40% of the way through. We were starting to begin to see where things were going to unfurl. Ultimately, everyone was headed to the same point, and there was lots of different characters who had their own reasons for going to this point. Ultimately, it was to find out who the traitor was, but we had people after Anise and people after the Duke, and people who were in on secret plots and people who were secretly betraying each other. The pregnancy wasn't really a massive focus, and there was a little touch at the very end, but other than that, the main plot was for everyone to try and prove what they thought the truth was. We got to that point relatively unscathed. I think if you are looking for a book about bards, then this is a really nice one to start with. I know there is more to the series, but from what I can see, it doesn't follow these same main characters. It follows other characters. I'm not too sure whether I'll pick those up, at least not in the context of this video anyway, because I did enjoy the characters that we did see, but I can understand how their story is done for now, because it wraps up pretty well at the end of the book. I think the next book I'm going to start is Till Death Do Us Bard by Rose Black. This one I knew a little bit more about. I think the spouse gets kidnapped. I probably should have checked that before I said I think. Okay, yeah, so I just checked. We have someone who is an ex-adventurer who is now retired, and then their spouse disappears, and the plot follows them as they try and get their husband back. I've heard mixed things about this one. I know one of my friends has given it 3 stars, so I'm gonna dip into it and see anyway, because it's a book about bards, and that is the point of this video. Hi, it's been a few days. I thought I would film a quick update to let you know about Till Death Do Us Bard. I started this last week, and it is a story which follows our main character Logan. He works as essentially a bodyguard, and he is married to a bard named Pie, or Magpie, and in the first chapter we learn that Magpie suddenly goes missing, and so it's up to Logan to find out what has happened to his husband. I got 24% of the way in, and I wasn't really feeling it, and I decided to give it a few days because I went away for the weekend. I thought I'd pick up Bard City Blues whilst I was away, so I could just dip into something else and start the next book, and it kind of solidified my decision that I'm going to DNF Till Death Do Us Bard. There's a couple of reasons, and I'll try and remember them all because I didn't write them down. The first being that I just didn't vibe with the writing. The difference between the writing in Till Death Do Us Bard and Bard City Blues is just feels really different. And although I think that plot-wise both of them are probably a little bit shaky in areas, I just felt more invested in reading the writing of Bard City Blues. But for Tell Death to His Bard itself, my main kind of issue is that the characters just feel so flat. They are such caricatures of the caricatures they're meant to be. Logan is this gruff big man who is married to this kind of flirty bard, and we have this necromancer character who's very over the top and is talking about carrying her hat box around with her. And in certain contexts, when you read, and if you were reading it in another book, maybe if the writing was different, if the plot was different, I think it would be different, but it's not. And to kind of add on to that, I think because the characters are so flat, it makes it hard to be invested in the relationship as well. We meet Logan and Pi, and immediately Logan is noticing that Pi is acting kind of strange and things are a little bit off, and by the end of the first chapter Pi goes missing, and so we spend no real time with the two of them together. So I wasn't invested in their relationship at all, and so it made it kind of hard to care, especially in the way that Logan reacts afterwards. He has an encounter when he goes to the necromancer because he's convinced that he has nowhere else to go on, so he's convinced that Pi must be dead. The necromancer asks him to give Pi's real name, because he says Pi at first. It takes him a moment to remember his husband's name, and I just thought that was kind of weird because they kind of remember it in unison, because they're like, oh yeah, because he's got this, his name's like Aloysius. I don't actually know how you pronounce it. Aloysius, Aloysius, either way. And I was just like, that was, I don't know, I didn't really like that. It was a very specific thing to not like, but I didn't like it. And then also there's another character who I won't spoil because I feel like I'm spoiling a little bit already, but there's another character who has an important part to play in Logan's history, who knows him a lot in the past, and she accuses him of saying maybe the reason that Pi left is because of you, and we are given nothing up to that point to believe that there is any real issues in the relationship, and Logan immediately is like, yeah, it must be because of me. And it just felt like such a failure in the characterization for that to be his reaction. Like, I wasn't keen on it at all. And then also there was no reason for us to believe that Pi is dead. It's very obvious that it is very suspicious behaviour that he has in that first chapter. So for Logan to immediately assume he was dead, it just kind of made me feel like, come on, like, it's obvious where they're going with this. And then they're supposed to go off on this quest to track down Pi, because Pi is off, well, spoilers, there is some spoilers here, Pi is off doing this quest on behalf of someone who's not good, and it just, I couldn't do it. So I stopped at about 24%. I know that in the reviews there's a lot of talk about the necromancer and her harassment of the characters, and I did agree that, like, from the bits I saw, it just felt so it wasn't necessary, and apparently it gets worse as the book goes on. So yeah. And also I saw my friend that I mentioned in the last clip over the weekend, and she said that she gave it a reluctant 3 stars, so that made me feel more secure in DNFing it. So that brings me on to Bard City Blues, which I started as well. This one follows our main character Gally. She is from outside of the city, but she really wants to be a bard, and she's essentially been disowned because she wants to be a bard, so she has no money and has to make her way in the city. Ends up getting hired as a dishwasher because this lady in this tavern won't accept her being a bard, doesn't want her to perform because of her history with bards, and at the same time as she's a dishwasher, she's also staying in this kind of bardic house where everyone has to train to these really specific standards. They can't practice outside music, they can only practice the music that they're given to practice. They shouldn't be staying out late, they shouldn't be drinking, all of these different rules. I think it's pretty obvious where the plot is going to go. I'm 40% in. It kind of makes sense that she's probably going to throw off this place that she's staying, because it's not how she wants to grow as a person. The plot is really meandering though. She is somehow now involved in this mystery of this potentially haunted painting that she's essentially used as leverage to perform as a bard in the tavern. And I'm not really, I don't really care about the plot, but I think the writing's a lot better, and I am not DNFing 2 books for this video because this video is going out at the end of the week and I refuse to do that to myself. The best character is the Gelatinous Cube, who is also a dishwasher, or dirt consumer, I should probably say, who only speaks in third person and had some really funny quotes. I don't have my Kindle with me right now. It's over the other side of the room, and if I get up, I'm balancing the tripod on 2 pillows precariously, so I can't really get up right now. But I'll try and remember the quotes for the next clip. It's one of those cheesy things where it's like Zolgoth wants to eat you or something like that, but then it was also saying things that aid Gallia's emotional development as well. There is a love interest. Her name's Alex. The romance is not really there at the moment, but it's obviously implied that that's who Gallia is going to have romantic interest for. There is like a flicker of like insta love or like insta lust, and later on Gallia's like, oh, how can I ever been attracted to her? And it kind of is just like there isn't really enough chemistry there for me to really feel anything. But as I said, the writing's pretty good, and I'm invested in Zolgoth and this other dishwasher who is a skeleton also. So last night I finished Bard City Blues, and it's going to be a 3-star read for me. I think it wrapped up quite nicely. There was quite heartwarming moments between a lot of the characters. We saw the romance resolved, we saw the mystery resolved as well. Plot wise, I still think things were a little bit shaky. It definitely was a cozy fantasy, cozy mystery sort of book. The mystery itself just kind of, there was bits to the mystery which I don't know if it was just when I was reading it and maybe I wasn't paying enough attention, but it kind of was quite difficult to find out who was behind the mystery itself. It didn't feel very strong, but I guess looking back things made sense. I just don't think there was enough kind of hints as towards who stole this mysterious painting as we go through the book, because of the other things that are going on with the story. It resolved pretty much how I anticipated it to resolve, and like I said, like the last couple of chapters were definitely quite heartwarming. There was a marriage. After the third act conflict, we had Alex and Gallia get back together, so yeah, it resolved pretty well. I think the romance, like I said, I don't think it really was pretty strong chemistry wise. There's a point where the third act conflict happens and they kind of split apart and break up, and Gallia's like, I have to break up with Alex or something like that, and I was like, break up? You weren't even together in the first place. And there is a moment later on where she acknowledges, she's like, oh, I can't remember quite what the quote was now, but it was something to do with, oh, like something about an ex, and not like Alex was even my ex in the first place. And I was like, okay, so at least it's acknowledged. Like there was, from what I thought, not really anything. They spent a lot of time together, but nothing to kind of confirm that they would have been dating at that point, and then by the end of the book they obviously get together. Overall, it was a decent read. I would recommend it if you are looking for a cozy fantasy which has a mystery and is well written as well, so definitely one to look out for if you're interested in it. That brings this video to an end. That's 2 books I read, one that I DNF'd, books about bards. I haven't decided which I'm going to move on to after this. I have a couple of classes where I've lined up quite a few books already, so we'll see. It depends. It depends on how many I can get from the library and things like that, and also it depends on what comes next on the fantasy bingo book card, because I have a suspicion it'll be paladins. It's come up a few times previously that paladins could potentially be an option, so I'm thinking it might be paladins, but I don't know. Watch this space, I guess. Editing Kim from the future here. I realised I forgot about those quotes from Zolgoth, the gelatinous cube, which I felt I had to include because they were just small little snippets that were definitely humorous in the story. So a couple of my favourites. Zolgoth, for context, as I said, is a gelatinous cube. So when they do the dishes, they put the dishes in him, and he absorbs all the dirt. So they have to wear this like gauntlet so they don't get dissolved by Zolgoth. And he says, you do not need the gauntlet, Zolgoth said the moment I opened his lid. Zolgoth will not hurt you. Zolgoth feels like soft animal babies. Put your tongue on Zolgoth. Does Zolgoth taste like ice cream? Put your ear in Zolgoth and you will hear the ocean. Later on, when Gallia is talking to Zolgoth about her mom, Zolgoth says, she sounds like a creature of great wickedness. Tell Zolgoth how she flensed your delicate heart. Which made me laugh a little bit. And again, in that same conversation, Zolgoth says, she spat you out of the family, he said. You did not beg to be reabsorbed. And then Gallia says, I don't want to be a judge investigator. I said, I want to be a bard. And then Zolgoth says, you are a fearless creature, Gallia. And then later, Zolgoth commands you to shove a thumb in the eye of Thea. And Zolgoth just says similar things like that throughout the whole book, and it's definitely kind of like a little silly thing, but just small bits of humour like that I do think really made the story. Also, I also forgot to say there are small illustrations throughout the book as well, which is quite nice, so you get to see the characters illustrated. So yeah, give Bard City Blues a go. It definitely was worth a read. I'll leave you with those parting messages from Zolgoth.